Hi Lily. Here's your workout. If you're not Lily, you're welcome to use this workout as well, but I'm going to talk to Lily quite a bit more offline, so you might not get the coaching cues and stuff that may be needed. You're going to need something heavy. She's got the blocks of weight and a towel, because you're going to get sweaty, hopefully. I'm going to run you through a warm-up, and then there will be 10 exercises that I want you to do in the succession that I lay them out for you. You're aiming for 10 repetitions. Let me know if that's not enough, and you want to run through each exercise 2 to 3 times. Okay, so you want to do each of those exercises 1 through 10 to 12 times, and then start fresh at the top and do them all through at least one more time, if not another 2 times, depending on how much time you have. Remember, if you're not Lily, make sure that you feel like you have a healthy spine, some healthy hips and shoulders, and you don't have any underlying health conditions that we would worry about when you're doing some of these more dynamic movements. You should be paying attention to any pain or discomfort in knees, low backs, or necks, and making sure that, again, as I said in every one of the clips, that your torso is strong and that you're starting in a really neutral and ideal standing position. Have fun with it. Let me know what you need. Here we go. Here's your warm-up. We're gonna grab this towel and just stand with your feet shoulder distance apart. Make sure your toes are nice and spread out and your legs are super active. You got equal weight in both feet. Abdominals are nice and firm. You're gonna grab onto the towel wider than your shoulders and think about trying to lengthen the towel. So you're pulling it nice and wide, keeping your bottom rib tucked in. The arms go up and overhead. Just pull them back as far as you can before your chin starts to pop forward, and then draw them right back down. So you're putting energy and effort into pulling the towel over your head as well as bringing it back so you can push back just a little bit. The arms are super active, and we're slowly increasing the range of motion that you get every time. You're gonna do that about 8 or 10 times, whatever feels awesome for your shoulders. Then we're gonna support that towel overhead. Again, I'm still trying to pull it nice and wide, still keeping equal pressure on both feet. We're gonna tip over into a bit of a side bend, keeping shoulders and hips, eyeballs all facing forward. And again, you're just gonna do 3 or 4 in each direction, whatever feels awesome for you. And then to keep on with the shoulder idea, we're gonna take that towel behind your back, your palms face forward now to hang on to the towel. And again, standing with that solid stance on the mat, abdominals and glutes working together. And now you just wanna try to elevate the towel up away from your bottom. You're gonna elevate the towel away from your bottom, pulling the tops of your shoulders back about 6 times or so. And then let that towel rest with some tension on your butt as you then slide it down your bottom and look up at the ceiling and then drop back up. So for me, it's pretty small. I'm just trying to pull the shoulders away from the ears and then bring myself back into neutral. And again, you're aiming for 5 to 6, 8, somewhere in there. How many repetitions you want to do is up to you. From there, we're going to move through some deep squat with some rotational work. So your feet are shoulder distance apart, turned out slightly, opening up through the shoulders. We're going to reach for the ceiling, keep those arms up and overhead, sink down into a super deep squat. You're aiming to get your heels on the ground. Mine aren't there yet because I just started. Hands come onto the floor, tip forward and immediately get weight onto your hands as you keep your butt nice and low. Find yourself in that high plank position, agitate it out a little bit, and then walk your hands back, keeping your butt nice and low. So you're bending deeply from the knees and the ankles. Find yourself in that really deep squat, whatever works for you. One arm reaches down, one arm reaches up, trying to lift the chest and eyes back to center, still keeping the heels on the ground and the knees moving wide away from your elbows. And then stand up nice and tall, reach up nice and wide. You're gonna do that sequence 5 times and then sink down into that deep squat. Walk yourself out into high plank. Keep your feet where they are. We're just gonna tip over onto the side, reaching up nice and high, nailing that side plank briefly before you come back into center. Replace that long neutral plank, pressing up with the bottom arm, reaching up with the top, coming back in, and again, dropping through your bottom, bending the knees, finding a deep squat. For me, I had to replace my feet, so give yourself permission to do that. And then stand up nice and tall, doing that 3 times over. There's your warm-up. All right, exercise number 1. You're gonna interlace these hands and stick them right up on top of your head. Now remember that when you do that, you're trying to push your head into your hands, not necessarily your hands into your head. And again, trying to avoid that turtleneck. So you wanna be nice and tall. We're gonna take one leg up off the mat, step back into a lunge position. From there, your back elbow is gonna come towards your front knee. We're gonna come back up into a stacked position and stand back up. The other leg goes back, so nail your lunge first, and then add that flexion rotation, come back up to a stacked and back up. So you're alternating. Again, fix each position before you decide you're moving on to the next component. You wanna make sure you're standing tall and complete before you step back. The back knee ends up bent, the glutes on both sides are working. You're balanced here. Before you decide, you're gonna add that flexion rotation. Whoa, you're gonna stack yourself right back up before you decide to stand tall again. Again, you're aiming for 10 repetitions, so that means 10 each side. Okay, exercise number 2, bent over row. I'm using a kettlebell. Again, if you've got those giant blocks, it might be a little bit awkward. Please let me know. Just because those blocks are so big, it doesn't necessarily allow you for a really awesome range of motion. So a bent over row, you've got to do it single. Because of the situation we're in here, we're not going to worry about trying to find a bench. You're going to find that back lunge position. So the lunge you just did wanted a bent back knee. We're just going to allow that leg to be nice and straight so that you can almost find a position where you're resting on your knee. If that's not available to you, that's okay too. One hand on that front knee. But what you want to try to do is get your torso as parallel to the floor as you can. Open up the shoulders, just let the weight hang with gravity, and then the movement is to pull straight up towards your rib cage and right back down without changing anything else. So my plank position from my hips all the way through to my ears is maintained as I draw my shoulder blade towards my spine first and then start to move from the elbow. As I lengthen back out, I'm going to stop at a position that keeps my shoulder active. I'm not going to let it drop, so that my shoulder girdle is always working even when I'm resting down at the bottom of the exercise. Okay, we're doing a lateral lunge. I'm gonna add a row in there with a bit of rotation, but you're gonna wanna take it slow just to make sure that your lumbar spine is healthy. So given that one of your goals is to increase your mobility, we got to work through some lateral work that might feel a little bit uncomfortable. So we're going to get fairly wide with the feet. They're probably going to end up turned out at the end of the day, but don't start there. Your movement is to stack up nice and tall. I want you in a bit of a starfish position to start. You're going to move from the hip, it goes back. One leg is bent, one leg is straight. You're reaching down towards the big toe on the opposite foot while keeping your head and chest up. And then you're standing all the way up and centered. And then we go to the other side. So I've got some rotation and back up to the other side. Down and back up. If you decide you're adding the weight, you're gonna let that weight go down towards the foot, but still your bottom is dropped lower than your chest. Coming up to center, switch sides, hinge back through the hip and come back up. So you could speed it up if you felt like you wanted to do that. So from the side, the movement is from the hip. Again, keeping that chest lifted, your eyes lifted. You're gonna send your bottom behind you, lifting from the chest, rather than hinging forward without any knee flexion. You gotta get movement from the knee, the ankle, and the hip, standing up completely every single time. Moving on to a single arm chest press, we're going to work through a bit of the neutral spine pieces, as well as the legs that Stuart McGill recommends for spinal stability. So you grab onto your heavy thing and make sure it's somewhere close. You're just going to lay back, allowing the shoulders to open so they feel heavy on the mat. The space between your shoulder blades is weighted to the mat. You've got some space between your low back and the floor, and your pubic bone and your hips are level. From there, if I'm working through my left side, I'm going to leave my left leg bent, and I'm going to straighten out my right, flexed ankle, pushing my heel into the ground. So everything is slightly active. Grabbing onto your weight, We're starting with the weight straight up over top of the chest. I'm using my opposite arm to, again, press into the floor just a little bit, but I'm trying to maintain the pressure points that I've got before the weight got up off the mat. From there, we're just bending the elbow, controlling it so it almost touches the floor, and then almost back up to a full extension of the elbow. So we bend without allowing a bunch of twisting and binding and shifting through the torso. Thinking about, again, that plank position, pushing both feet into the ground, pelvic floor is working just a little bit, bottom ribs tucked in towards the hips, and I'm breathing into the sides of my rib cage as I work through my right shoulder to pull it towards the mat, even though I'm pressing up with my left. And then you just switch sides and do it all over on the other side. Okay, we're going through what I would call a frog bridge. You can call it whatever you want. You can get dirty if you want, it's fun. So again, we're gonna lie back in that neutral position that I described in the single arm chest press, working through the shoulders all the way to the heels. If you think about pulling the backs of your shoulders along the mat towards your heels and vice versa, fires up the entire posterior chain, which is clearly a good thing. Feet are hip distance apart, again, active through the whole foot, pushing your big toe, your little toe, and your heel into the mat while simultaneously trying to lift from the arch of your foot. Using your upper body, we're just gonna press the pinkies into the floor just a little bit. Spine stays neutral as you press up into a neutral bridge position. So I wanna see ideally a straight line from the middle of your rib cage through your hips and out your knees, again, while thinking about pulling your heels and shoulders towards one another. From there, once you get here, you're gonna tip over onto the outside edges of your feet, come back to neutral, slowly lower your butt back down to the floor till it just barely taps, and then come all the way back up, give me a frog, come back to neutral, tap your bottom, all the way up, get your neutral space first, then we externally rotate from the femurs, then we come back to neutral, and we tap back down. Okay, a front raise. I like doing this because I need you to think about your plank position first, but it also works through the shoulder girdle, improves posture, does a lot of wonderful things. The wider your feet are, the more stable and accessible your awesome plank is gonna be. So if it becomes a little bit too easy, you just heel toe your feet together until you feel like you're sort of losing stability. So knees are slightly bent, abdominals and glutes as always working together. Shoulders are open and relaxed. If you pull them into your ears, pull them back and then let them drop, they'll fall into a place that feels kind of happy for you. Taking whatever it is you have. Now for me, again, it's this kettlebell, but I want you to fight the urge to wrap your fingers around your implement, to hang on to it and just press into it. So that pressure activates your lats and your upper back to keep that plank even more active. The arms are as straight as they can go. Again, keeping that head stacked right up on top of the rib cage. The arms stay nice and straight, come up to shoulder height, and then pull them right back down, moving from the shoulder only. So if you look at me from the side, there's no change in my posture as I start to lift the weight. I don't get to swing and change. Solid plank position, shoulder height, and all the way back down. And as I come back down, I want to lift my chest just a little bit so I don't end up hunching forward and strengthening in that position. Front raise. Okay, we're doing some eccentric push-ups, and I don't want to hear any complaints about the high plank, full plank position. Fight the urge to tell yourself you cannot do push-ups and drop to your knees immediately. That's not an option. You're starting on your toes. We're only going to focus on the lowering phase, so you get to up into high plank, whichever way makes sense for you. It can be totally ugly. That's where you take your rest. And then you focus on maintaining a really beautiful movement pattern on the way down. So the hands end up slightly wider than shoulders. Hands are spread out as wide as they can go and try to put pressure into your knuckles of every finger. We're looking ahead of us just a little bit so that we can maintain our neutral spine all the way through the cervical spine. So finding that plank position, again, glutes, abdominals, legs, the kneecaps pulling up to the hips, my feet and ankles are active, my shoulders are open, and my brain is paying attention to all of those connections. The real job here is to maintain your shoulder girdle connection, so I'm not gonna drop out of my scap. I'm gonna try to pull everything up and maintain that connection. And as slowly as I can, I'm bending my elbows, slowly lowering my nose, my chest, and my belly button to the floor in one piece as slowly as I can. I'm gonna get there, I'm gonna release out the work, fix all that stuff. However it works for you, replace yourself in plank and go right back down to controlling that eccentric motion controlled by the pec major. 10 of those, you got this. Some bird dog progressions, sort of. Again, to address the goal of trying to increase your mobility, we're gonna start to increase core stability and mobility towards the same goal. So finding ourselves in a 4-point stance, again, hands are spread out as wide as you can get them, directly underneath the shoulders so you can really lengthen through those arms. Press into your fingerprints, press into every part of your hand. Abdominals are firm. Again, my head is lifted away from the floor, so I feel like every part of my body is doing a little bit of something. If I drop my head down, I can see that my knees are roughly hip distance apart, and I tuck my toes under because I like to spread the weight off of my knee into my feet a little bit, again, so I can get more muscular engagement through my whole person. Ensuring that your torso remains flat and parallel to the floor. It doesn't twist or shift. We're gonna take one arm off, reaching overhead. So I'm not thinking about lifting it. I'm thinking about taking it off the floor and just sliding it out in front of me. Then I'm gonna take the opposite leg and do the same. So I've got this tabletop position. From here, as long as you can maintain tabletop, you're gonna pull your elbow towards your knee underneath you, really elevating the belly button away from the floor. And then we're gonna reach out back to neutral, replace that squared up torso, and then lift everything away from the floor, keeping the legs straight and the elbow straight. Back to neutral, sliding into a big flexion position, back to neutral, into extension. If, however, when you reach out, you start to fall and shake and quiver and everything kind of goes haywire on you, regress it back so that maybe it's just one arm at a time and you're moving nice and slow. Maybe then you work through the legs as they're heavier and more challenging, and then you start to add all of the limbs in, putting it all together. If you haven't quite figured this out yet, first and foremost is always going to be the plank. Provides you with core stability work without having to do a bunch of extra exercises. So in an effort to forward that, you're going to find yourself against a wall. You want to stand about arm distance away from it, but not to a full arm extension. It'll be slightly bent. Again, hand is spread out as wide as you can get it, at about shoulder height. You're going to push that into the wall. You want to try to lean into the wall without actually leaning into the wall, so that it pushes the strength of my arm, sends strength through down into my opposite foot. You want to find those opposing forces and still stay standing upright. From there, whatever it is that you've got that's heavy, it comes up into a lateral raise, again, only as high as your shoulder, and right back down, but maintaining the pressure on the wall, the pressure into your feet, the control through the abdominal wall to make sure that you're not changing, you're not side bending. Bending the elbow will allow the shoulder to take less load, straightening it out a little bit more load, and then switch sides. Exercise number 10, Lily. It's a deadlift or a hip hinge. The key factor to that is that you are not moving from your spine, you are moving from your hip only. The heavy thing that you will have gives you more awareness tool, but it also provides a bunch of opportunity for the potentially risky spinal movements that occur here. So be careful with that. You're gonna start with your feet shoulder distance apart-ish. Again, anchored through those feet all the way through your torso and up to the shoulders, and just open those shoulders. So I want the shoulders stacked over the hips to start with. The line that exists between my hips through my rib cage, my shoulders, and out my ears is gonna be maintained as I hinge at the hip, so I'm closing my hip crease, shifting my weight into my toes to the point where I feel like I can't move from my hamstrings anymore, and I'm gonna fire up my glutes to come right back up into a standing position. So as I go down, hinging at the hip, again, closing this hip crease, my weight shifts into my toes, and I can almost feel like I'm pulling myself down while simultaneously hiking up my booty a little bit. So I do feel the stretch in my calves and my hamstrings before my glutes fire me back up to come up nice and straight. What I do not want to see is any form of spinal flexion or extension. So I don't want to get down here and do any wacky stuff. The only movement comes from the hips, firing up the glutes to come all the way back up. So it provides you with some increased mobility potential and strength and stability. Be careful with it, but it is a super good one. Enjoy it.